Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and we like to delve into great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, magnum opuses, tour de forces, earth-shattering discoveries, mainly from obscure sources, and things that you probably don't know anything about, but if you did, they would change your life in positive ways. And in particular, for your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, and your formation of holistic worldview, your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health. Today is our 191st episode of the Reciprocal Church, where we're attempting to put together spiritual resources to syncretically construct a real pragmatic American religion to replace the soon-to-be collapsed Western religions based on the Old and New Testaments, which are both fraudulent and cannot possibly be taken literally, given the amount of evidence in its favor and balanced by the amount of evidence against it. And in particular, in the New Testament, to the chagrin of the red-pilled brigades out there, is an obvious Roman psyop that you haven't done enough digging to uncover yet. I would suggest that you start now while this reconstruction is in place, so that so that we get all the way back to the root. That's why we have to go all the way back. We can't just go back to 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination or even the Civil War or 1871 or 1776. It goes way, way, way back. It goes back to zero. But then it also goes back to BC and Adam and Eve. It goes all the way back to the beginning. And so when we reconstruct right now, it's going to be very incomplete unless we start to do the proper digging on our books. So that's what we're kind of trying to do here. We're attempting to make a decode of the New Testament. We'll be trying a decode of the Old Testament here pretty soon. But we're looking at some of the work of Joseph Atwill and also Michael Menescat's. And their Atwill has a book called Caesar's Messiah, where he shows, demonstrates, and allows you to show to yourself that the Gospels in particular, but in his later work, Shakespeare's Secret Messiah, also really the entire New Testament was written by one or the other of the Flavian Caesars from 69 to 96 AD. And in particular, they were written by what I would call Team Josephus. Josephus being the Jewish historian who Christians know as the guy who corroborates the existence of Jesus. But he does nothing of the sort. He, many people throughout history, Josephus's book, War of the Jews, was part of the New Testament. Well, maybe part of the Old Testament. I think part of the New Testament. For many sects. and including the preterists who still use Josephus, because the prophecies that Jesus makes in the New Testament are fulfilled by the emperors Titus and Vespasian, who at the time were military generals fighting against the Jews in the War of the Jews from 66 to 73 AD. And Titus and Vespasian fulfilled the prophecies of Jesus. And so that's why Josephus's work was part of the Bible for a long time. But at a certain point, people recognized what that actually entailed. What it entailed, that Jesus predicting of his second coming, the second coming of Jesus was Titus Caesar. And it's much more plausible to see that when you see all the parallels between Josephus's War of the Jews and the New Testament, that to posit that they were written by the same entities, probably a team of Jews who had kind of defected over to the Romans and knew a ton of Jewish history and culture and lore and scripture, but were now using it to ensure the hegemony of the Romans. And the Romans had major motivations to do this, because in all of their gigantic empire, the Jews were the most difficult to handle of all of their, provinces and colonies or whatever. And they had just gotten done fighting a 7-year-long war against the Jews. Vespasian and Titus were both injured in these battles. And so they had a complete motive to put out a Jesus character who believed in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and turning the other cheek, and walking an extra mile with a Roman's backpack. And that is why they put together the Gospels. But in addition to that, they also used it in order to mock the Jews and the Gentiles who became Christians later on. It is worth saying that Titus, especially, was known to have created several religions, not just Christianity. He basically, between Vespasian and Titus, they created rabbinical Judaism. Titus created a cult for his father, Vespasian. Vespasian was deified by the Roman Senate. Titus had to put together a campaign for that. You have to get, in order to get deified by the Roman government, you have to have a little trial for it or whatever. So Titus is experienced in putting together religions. After Titus died, he was deified by his brother Domitian, and who became emperor in 81 AD. And so Domitian also has experience creating a religion. So they had the motive, the means, and the method. And they should be first on the list for suspects of who wrote these. Now, what we're looking at today is how what Atwell calls the Flavian signature, which is a series of parallels between Titus and Jesus, that a lot of times Jesus prophesies something metaphorically. I'm going to make you fishers of men. And then in War of the Jews, Titus fulfills the prophecy literally. And so in Josephus' War of the Jews, they're explaining a battle that's occurring at the very same location where Jesus made his prophecy. And this is on the Sea of Galilee, and many of the Jews fell into the water, and Titus's men have to kind of spear them or dart them out of the water. I don't believe they used the nets, but they were basically fishing for men. And it goes on and on like that. We're at about the 16th one, which is called Knocking on the Door. And so we're going to go through what Josephus says here in Book 5, Chapter 2, paragraph 67 to 68. Knocking on the door. As that legion that had been at Emmaus was joined to Caesar at night, he removed thence when it was day, and it came to a place called Scopus, from whence the city began already to be seen, and a plain view might be taken of the great temple. Accordingly, this place on the north quarter of the city, and joining thereto, was a plain, and very properly named Scopus, the prospect, and was no more than 7 furlongs distant from it. And here it was that Titus ordered a camp to be fortified for 2 legions that were to be together, but ordered another camp to be fortified at 3 furlongs farther distance behind them, for the 5th legion, for he thought that by marching in the night they might be tired, and might deserve to be covered from the enemy, and with less fear might fortify themselves. So he's referring to that as knocking on the door, getting close to the camp that they're about to attack. And some of the men get closer than others. And this, Atwill says, the parallel is coming from the book of Luke, chapter 11, verses 5 through 12. And again, these parallels are in order. So, you don't have to go backwards in the book. They occur in sequence in both books, in the same sequence, one after another after another. There may be a few pages in between. Generally, when you read Josephus, what you kind of see is he gives you the history, tells you what happened, but he makes a lot of seemingly irrelevant asides and goes into little discussions that don't really contribute to the history. Whenever he does that, he's going into code. He's going into making these parallels. All of his asides are relevant for those hidden reasons. Also, some of these parallels are very obvious, and some of them are hidden. Some of them you have to actually look for in order to find, and some of them just kind of, emerge. Some of them just kind of pop out to you. So anyway, this is the knocking on the door parallel from the book of Luke 11. The man needed 3 loaves because he had 3 legions. That's one of the codes that is said to be from Josephus, is that whenever Jesus is talking about loaves, using 5 loaves to feed 5,000 or whatever, that actually in the War of the Jews, that means 3 legions. So 3 legions of soldiers. A legion is a few thousand. And interestingly, when you use the Dead Sea Scrolls cipher to interpret these texts, loaves actually means Levites or priests. So the priests are the ones who prepare the loaves, and they serve them at the communion. And when you use when you make the loaves, the communion is like the second initiation. The first initiation is the baptism. That's for the, kind of outsiders to get in. But for the insiders, it is the communion. And that is, where Jesus turns water into wine, what he's doing is he's allowing the novices who are getting baptized, and that's as far as they can go, most likely because they are non-Jews, Gentiles, uncircumcised. But Jesus is bending those rules, and so he's wanting to allow these non-Jews to also be able to get the second level of initiation, which is the communion, the water, and the bread and wine. So when he is turning water into wine, he's allowing the Gentiles to gain a second level of initiation, which they couldn't because they are non-Jews and they're not circumcised. So that's why, you know, at least according to some of the stories, that he is, you know, needed to be taken out, because many of the zealous Jews did not want it that way, including his own brother. But that's a different cipher, a different interpretation. So right now we're looking again at Luke 11. The man needed 3 loaves because he had 3 legions to feed. Now, here's the Luke. Who comes during the night and tries to get someone who has shut his door to open it? Jesus commends the persistence of the knocker, who will not leave, thereby getting the door that was shut to be opened. Note that the question of the last line, or if he is asked for an egg, he will not give him a scorpion, will he? The scorpion was the name for the Roman artillery piece called the ballista, and it was definitely going to be given to the Jewish rebels. I think that is what the Romans were using to knock on the door. The author mentions a catapult here to set up the triumphant entrance, where the stones cry out, which Eisenman says is a mistranslation, where it should be it's not stones, it is sun. The sun cries out, S-O-N. And apparently they're the same word, ben. So that's interesting. But that's in Josephus. The stones cry out, which follows, and he said to them, which of you shall have a friend and go to him at midnight and say to him, friend, lend me 3 loaves? For a friend of mine has come to me on his journey, and I have nothing to set before him. And he will answer from within and say, do not trouble me, the door is now shut, and my children are with me in bed. I cannot rise and give to you. I say to you, though he will not rise and give to him because he is his friend, yet because of his persistence he will rise and give him as many as he needs. So I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and who seeks finds. And to him who knocks, it will be opened. Now, suppose one of you fathers is asked by his son for a fish. He will not give him a snake instead of a fish, will he? Or if he's asked for an egg, will he not give him a scorpion? Okay, so that is a pretty interesting parallel there, because you know, it talked about Josephus talked about Titus and his kind of getting ready to invade the city, setting up his catapults to knock on the door, you know, to tear down the gates of the city. And first he says, in Luke, it says, now suppose one of you fathers is asked by his son for a fish. The whole symbolism is that, you know, Titus is killing Jews. That's, you know, in this case, he's invading the city, knocking on the door. And he says, you know, seek and you shall find, and to him who knocks, it will be opened. Now, suppose one of you fathers is asked by his son for a fish. Throughout this, the Romans call Jews fishes. So asked his son for a fish, asked his son for a Jew. He will not give him a snake instead of a fish, will he? Or if he is asked for an egg, he will not give him a scorpion, will he? And as Atwill said, scorpion is the ballista, which is the catapult weapon that the Romans have aimed up right at the gates here to tear down the walls. The scorpion was the name of the Roman artillery piece called the ballista, and it was definitely going to be given to the Jewish rebels. So that's a start. That's one parallel. I was looking at Josephus a little bit. I read Josephus a few years ago, and my level of understanding of it is a lot higher now, so I'm going to read it again. But he talks about right in the introduction how he's defending Titus like crazy. He blames the whole war of the Jews on these factions of Jewish zealots who basically, kind of almost in an Antifa-like way, they just kind of terrorized the Jerusalem itself, their own territory, and it wasn't Titus's fault. Titus, he said, didn't intentionally burn down the city, and he didn't steal all the wealth of the temple. Josephus is on obviously Josephus is writing this from Rome, the court of the Caesars, because when he surrendered to Vespasian, he gave Vespasian the star prophecy saying, I foresee that you're going to become the emperor. And when he did, when Vespasian did become the emperor, he got Josephus out of prison, out of his war prison, prisoner of war status, and adopted him as his son and brought him to Rome. So he's writing directly under the orders of the Caesars. So he obviously can't tell you what's really going on, or what really happened. Although he claims that he's, saying the truth. Okay, the next parallel is called the house of Satan divided against itself. And I love how, just a couple chapters ago, Jesus was talking about, he who is not with us is against us. And then he comes up with this. First we're going to look at the War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 2. Jewish rebels realized when the Romans showed up that they must join together. The seditious now saw with astonishment the Romans pitching 3 several camps. They began to think of an awkward sort of concord, and said one to another, "What do we do here, and what do we mean when we suffer 3 fortified walls to be built to coop us in, that we shall not be able to breathe freely?" So they're talking about began to think of an awkward sort of concord. Now we go to the book of Luke, chapter 11, again, these are in order. Chapter 11, verse 17. Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falls. If Satan also is divided against himself, how will his kingdom stand? Because you say, I cast out demons by Beelzebub. And if I cast out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore, they will be your judges. But if I cast out demons with the finger of God, surely the kingdom of God has come upon you. So a house divided against itself falls. And that's kind of the theme of that parallel. You know, it's something that you're not really going to see unless you're looking for it. If you're really, really familiar with the text and you know, are into the symbolism of it, you probably can see it a little bit quicker than that. But yeah, so, but it does contrast with he who is not with me is against me. And I bring division. I come to bring division. But then two chapters later, he's saying, a house divided against itself falls. Okay, the next parallel. Man in armor who will be overcome. And we'll start out with what is here, War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 2, paragraphs 73 to 75. While the enemy is securely building a kind of city in opposition to us, and while we sit still within our own walls and become spectators only of what they are doing, with our hands idle and our armor laid by, as if they were about somewhat that was for our good and advantage, we are, it seems, so they cry out, only courageous against ourselves, while the Romans are likely to gain the city without bloodshed by our sedition. Thus did they encourage us one another when they were gotten together, and took their armor immediately, and ran out upon the 10th legion, and fell upon the Romans with great eagerness, and with a prodigious shout, as they were fortifying their camp. Okay, so they fell upon the 10th legion. It says, man in armor who will be overcome. He says, become spectators only of what they are doing, with our hands idle and our armor laid by, as if they were about somewhat that was for our good and advantage. Okay. I don't see the parallel here. I think I made a mistake again here, because I don't see the parallel verse from the book of Luke. It certainly is, I'll find it, because it's in chapter 11, and it's between verses 20 and 29. So I'll look for that in the book of Luke and try to get back to you on that one, number 18. Number 19 is called The Crowds Increase. Luke 11:29, as the crowds were increasing. And in War of the Jews, it says, the Jews became still more and more in number. The next one is called Lying in Wait. And we're still in Luke 11, moving up to verse 53. The scribes and the Pharisees began to assail him vehemently and to cross-examine him about many things, lying in wait for him and seeking to catch him in something he might say, that they might accuse him. And then War of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 3, paragraph 121. Caesar himself, who spake to them thus, these Jews who are only conducted by their madness, do everything with care and circumspection. They contrive stratagems and lay ambushes, lying in wait. Okay, this next one is called The Woe-Saying Jesus. And this goes to this kind of famous part of Luke 11. But I believe Atwill explains it a little bit here. The woe-saying Jesus in Josephus died 1 month before the abomination of desolation at the same point in the gospel storyline. So there's like an exactly 40-year shift here, I believe. Now here, this is coming from Josephus, this is coming from Luke. I don't know why we went backwards here, but we're backwards to Luke 11:43. So we went back a couple of verses to get this one. Woe to you, this is from Luke 11. Woe to you, Pharisees, for you love the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like graves which are not seen, and the men who walk over them are not aware of them. Then one of the lawyers answered and said to him, Teacher, by saying these things you reproach us also. And he said, Woe to you also, lawyers, for you loud men with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. In fact, you bear witness that you approve the deeds of your fathers, for they indeed killed them, and you build their tombs. Therefore, the wisdom of God also said, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them will kill and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required for this generation. From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, who perished between the altar and the temple. Yes, I say to you, it shall be required of this generation. Woe to you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter in yourselves, and those who were entering in you hindered. And the parallel verse from Josephus, which is chapter 6, book 6, chapter 5. We're going to have to go back and do this tomorrow because it's too long to read right now. So we'll go back and start the woe. These people are so long-winded. Just get to the parallels. But anyway, thanks for tuning in today, and have a great